So, my wife lived in Australia for a couple of years. She said Anzac Day, the Dawn Service, the Battle of Gallipoli, it's a massive deal over there, but perhaps less known in the US and Europe. Is that one of the reasons you sort of took this project on?
Oh, it's culturally iconographic in Australia, that's for sure. You grow up as a kid in Australia and New Zealand with the details of the sacrifice of Gallipoli tattooed on your eyeballs or your eyelids, you know. So yeah, for sure. I mean, from the culture that I come from, it's one of the defining moments. You know, they often say that you know, Australia and New Zealand were forged as nations on this particular battlefield. So yeah, it's very important to us, and like many people, I've grown up with that respect deeply embedded, and wherever I am in the world, if I'm not at home, you know, I try and find the dawn service that's happening in that place, and if there isn't one, then I create one, you know, and make sure that every year I pay my respects and gratitude to that sacrifice given. But there's another aspect of this story which, you know, opened up a completely different point of view. You know, out of all those times I've been to those dawn service, I have to tell you honestly, I never once spent a minute thinking about this battle from the perspective of the quote-unquote enemy, from the Turkish perspective.
Why are we seeing that narrative now? We're seeing it often, the fact that war films have the German perspective, this film has the Turkish perspective. Why are we suddenly just finally having both sides of the story, do you think?
What films have had the German perspective?
Sweet Française last week told it through, you know, a German point of view in many respects.
I don't know that film.
But the fact you chose to involve the Turkish.
Well, 100 years later, it's time to open our hearts a little bit more. You know, I mean, there's fundamental information in this film. You know, for 100 years we've been talking about Gallipoli, and now everybody knows that the Turks don't call Gallipoli Gallipoli; they call it Çanakkale. You know, and if you really think about it, that's kind of embarrassing.
It's hugely moving that the bond between the brothers in this film. Certainly, I don't want to give it away. Certainly, the end game of it, you know, it'd be hard not to cry at that moment. Did the story have more resonance for you because you have got boys, you are a father?
Oh, look, man, once you're a parent, you see everything in the world through those eyes, through that prism, you know. So, yeah, you know, but there's aspects in this film that I very definitely, you know, want my boys to know about me, you know. And this is an unashamedly anti-war movie.
You've done close to 50 movies. I was trying to toss it up on the internet.
I think it is actually 50.
Is it now 50?
Yeah, well, there's some films that I've done that people don't know about.
Okay. Well, we won't go there, but you've done 50 that we know about.
I was young. Yeah. I needed the money. No, you know, but you know, in my 19-year apprenticeship between the age of 6 and 25, before I actually got lead roles in films, you know, I was an extra, you know, in many situations. So, yeah, it's 50, I think.
But you've never been an actor to sort of turn up, read his lines, go back to his trailer. You've always been involved in the whole creative process. Mm-hmm. Even though you know how to talk this language, you know how a film set works, you know how films work. Mm-hmm. Was there still that sense of trepidation from you the first day?
Before we started, 3 or 4 days before the shoot started, you know, you're questioning yourself on such a base level, you know, such a deep level. You're going, how am I going to get away with this? You know, will that thing, that ease that I've always had with film crews and camera crews, will that change now that I'm actually the boss? You know, so I was, you know, nervous beyond belief, like that level of stage fright you couldn't imagine, you know. And then the first 3 weeks went off without a hitch. We're in the studio. I think we did 2.5 hours or 3 hours of overtime in the first 3 weeks. And I've been on films where you're doing 4 or 5 hours of overtime a day, you know. So that was great, you know. I was like, wow, I'm really comfortable with this. I'm getting the response and everything. And then over this Christmas break that we had, I started to realize we're not in a studio anymore. Now we're out in the outback, you know, and will the crew still respond in the same way when they're not sleeping in their own beds at nighttime, you know? So that whole churn of nervous energy and stage fright basically started again, you know, and then that section of the film went fine, and, you know, now we're going to fly to Turkey. Now we're going to shoot in Turkey. 75% of the crew leaves, and now 75% of the crew will speak another language. Will they be able to understand me? And, you know, so yeah, it was a continuous thing where, you know, you're always wondering whether you'll measure up. But that's, you know, to me, I've come to learn that, you know, that nerves, those butterflies, that stage fright is a simple indication that you care deeply about what you're doing. And you accept it and you welcome it. You don't get scared by it.
You've worked with some great directors. Sort of when a soccer player, for instance, becomes a manager and they say, I've taken a bit of Harry Redknapp, a bit of Alex Ferguson, and this is the manager I am. Is that what you've done as an actor?
I steal from everybody.
Is that what you've done?
No problem.
Yeah.
I'm a bandit. You know, I obviously got my own perspective, I always have. And some of the directors that I've worked with, particularly probably Ridley Scott and Ron Howard, you know, I know there's elements of what they do that is in a way influenced by me and what we could achieve together, what we have achieved together. But yeah, for sure, you know. You know, I'm doing things on film sets that, you know, were cemented in place in my mind 25 years ago, you know, where I know, right, that's the way you do this, that's the way you communicate with actors, this is the way you create an intimacy and a bond, you know, and a level of trust. But, you know, there's also times when you're on a film set, man, where you're looking at somebody doing something and you're going to yourself, I am learning right now that what that person is doing is something that I will never do on a film set, you know. So, yeah, you take the good with the bad, you know.
What's the future, just finally? Acting, directing, both?
Look, man, I used to think I had the greatest job in the world, and then I discovered this. So, you know, if it was up to me, there would never be another movie that I'm just acting in, you know. And it's a funny thing because I love my job, you know, but I love this job more.